This is the Zodiac speaking. Those 4 words didn't just launch a letter. They launched a decade of paralysis. They turned the rolling hills of Northern California into a hunting ground and the morning newspaper into a suicide note for the American dream. Most killers hide in the shadows. This one demanded the spotlight. He didn't just want to kill. He wanted to be the editor-in-chief of your nightmares. He was a ghost with a pen, a monster with a cipher, and a predator who understood the power of a brand long before the digital age. We've spent 50 years looking for a name. We've analyzed the ink, the stamps, the DNA, and the ciphers. We've looked into the eyes of a dozen suspects, waiting for one of them to blink. But as the decades crawl by, a terrifying possibility emerges. What if the mask wasn't just to hide his face? What if the mask was the point? This isn't just a cold case. It's a masterclass in psychological warfare. California in the late 1960s was supposed to be the epicenter of the future. The summer of love had just passed. The air in Vallejo and San Francisco was thick with the scent of change, music, and progress. But on December 20th, 1968, that progress hit a dead end on Lake Herman Road. It was a cold Friday night. David Faraday, 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16, were on their first date. It was the quintessential American scene. A parked car, a quiet lover's lane, and the innocent anticipation of youth. They weren't alone for long. A car pulled up. A man stepped out. There was no robbery. There was no motive. Just a flurry of gunfire. David was shot at point-blank range. Betty Lou tried to run, a desperate dash for her life across the gravel. She was struck 5 times in the back. The police were baffled. In 1968, you killed for money, for passion, or for revenge. You didn't kill for nothing. But the silence on Lake Herman Road was just the prologue. 6 months later, July 4th, 1969, while the rest of the country celebrated independence with fireworks, the darkness returned to Blue Rock Springs Park. Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau were sitting in Darlene's Corvair when a car pulled up behind them, blinding them with its high beams. A man approached the passenger side. He didn't say a word. He opened fire with a 9mm Luger. Michael was hit in the jaw, the shoulder, and the leg. Darlene was struck several times. As the shooter walked back to his car, he heard Michael groan. He didn't panic. He didn't flee. He calmly walked back to the window and fired 2 more shots into each of them. Then he went to a phone booth. At 12:40 a.m., the Vallejo Police Department received a call. The voice on the other end was calm, rehearsed, and chillingly polite. "I want to report a double murder. If you will go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park, you will find the kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." The game had officially begun. In August 1969, the monster demanded an audience. 3 nearly identical letters arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. "Dear editor, I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman Road." Included was a cipher, a chaotic mess of 408 characters, symbols, and letters. The threat was explicit. Print the cipher on the front page, or he would cruise around all weekend killing lone people in the night. Then move on to kill again, until I end up with a dozen people killed. He wasn't just a killer anymore. He was an influencer. He was leveraging the media to amplify his terror, turning every citizen into a witness and every reader into a potential victim. The 408 cipher was cracked not by the FBI or the CIA, but by a high school teacher and his wife. The message revealed a fractured, narcissistic mind. It spoke of collecting slaves for the afterlife. It claimed that killing was more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all. But it didn't give a name. By September, the terror shifted from the urban sprawl to the rugged beauty of Lake Berryessa. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were relaxing by the water when a figure emerged from the trees. This wasn't the man in the car from the previous attacks. This was something out of a medieval nightmare. The attacker wore a black square-shaped hood with slits for eyes. On his chest was a white, hand-stitched symbol, a circle with a cross through it, a crosshairs. He told them he was an escaped convict. He tied them up with pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline. And then he took out a long serrated knife. He stabbed Brian 10 times and Cecilia 16. Then he walked to their car. On the door, he wrote the dates of his previous attacks and the time of this one, 6/29. He signed it with his crosshairs. He wanted them to survive just long enough to know who did it. Cecilia didn't make it. Brian did. He described a man who was methodical, someone who seemed to be playing a role. The hood wasn't for utility, it was for theater. The Zodiac was no longer just a man, he was a character. The final confirmed strike happened in the heart of San Francisco, Presidio Heights, October 11th, 1969. Paul Stein, a 29-year-old cab driver, picked up a passenger. At the corner of Washington and Cherry Streets, the passenger shot Stein in the back of the head. Witnesses saw the killer. They saw him wiping down the cab. They saw him walk away. But a catastrophic error in the police dispatch described the suspect as a black male. 2 officers, Donald Fook and Eric Zelms, were blocks away. They saw a white man walking calmly away from the scene. They even spoke to him. Because of the dispatch error, they let him go. They let the Zodiac walk right into the darkness of the Presidio Park. Days later, the Chronicle received a letter. Inside was a blood-soaked piece of Paul Stein's shirt. The Zodiac mocked the police, laughing at their incompetence. He threatened to shoot out the tires of a school bus and pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. The city broke. Parents followed school buses in their cars. Armed guards stood over children. The Zodiac had achieved total saturation. He owned the city's psyche. But the panic wasn't confined to the city streets. In March 1970, the terror found Kathleen Johns. She was driving down a desolate road with her infant daughter when a stranger signaled that her wheel was loose. It was the fatal error of civility, accepting help from a monster. The man didn't tighten the bolts. He removed them. When the car failed, he offered a ride to what should have been a gas station. There was no gas station. There was only an hour and a half of a silence broken by promises of death. Kathleen wasn't just a hostage. She was a captive audience for a monster driving toward nowhere. In a moment of clarity born of pure desperation, she didn't wait for the end. With her baby in her arms, she opened the door and leaped into the cold asphalt, vanishing into the darkness of the fields while the killer hunted her with a flashlight. frustrated that his prey chose the abyss over his car. Later, the Zodiac would write about the interesting ride, boasting of a crime that almost ended in silence. Then, the suspects started to emerge. The name that haunts the case more than any other is Arthur Lee Allen. Allen was a former schoolteacher, a convicted child molester, and a man who seemed to fit every jagged edge of the Zodiac's profile. He wore a Zodiac brand watch. He talked about killing people with a flashlight attached to his gun. He lived in Vallejo. He was in the areas of the crimes. But the evidence was always circumstantial. His DNA didn't match the partial profile found on the stamps. His fingerprints didn't match the ones on Paul Stein's cab. His handwriting didn't match the letters. Was he the luckiest killer in history? Or was he a man who simply enjoyed the infamy of being the prime suspect? Other names filled the vacuum. Gary Francis Post, Richard Gaikowski, Lawrence Kane. Each had compelling clues. Each had a group of dedicated researchers convinced they had found the man. But the more we look for a single face, the more the case seems to dissolve. In 2020, after 51 years, a team of international codebreakers finally cracked the Z340 cipher, the one the FBI said was impossible. "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me," it read. "I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner because I now have enough slaves to work for me." No name, no confession, just more of the same taunting narcissism. Why does this case refuse to die? Because the Zodiac understood something terrifying about the human condition. He understood that a mystery is more powerful than a solution. If they had caught him in 1969, he would be a footnote, another miserable man in a jumpsuit. But by never being caught, he stayed young. He stayed powerful. He stayed in the room with us. We look at the composite sketch, the heavy-rimmed glasses, the crew cut, the blank expression, and we see a ghost. He is the man in the grocery store. He is the grandfather in the rocking chair. He is the quiet neighbor who never bothered anyone. The Zodiac didn't just kill 5 people. He killed the idea that we can ever truly know the people around us. The letters stopped in 1974. The silence since then has been louder than any gunshot. Whether he died in obscurity, was incarcerated for another crime, or is still out there, watching these very documentaries and smiling at his own handiwork, we may never know. He told us he was collecting slaves for the afterlife. But looking at the millions of hours spent analyzing his every word, the thousands of lives consumed by his ciphers, and the enduring shadow he casts over the American consciousness, it seems he found his slaves right here on Earth. The crosshairs are still on us, and the case remains cold. What do you think was the Zodiac's biggest mistake? Or do you believe the real killer's name has never even appeared on a police report? Let's discuss it in the comments.